And that's my cue. Hi, everybody. I'm happy to be back today to finish what we started in April. We did part one of neuroplasticity and central sensitization, and now we're doing part two. We're going to focus a little bit more on body strategies because in the work that I do with my clients, really it's foundational to talk about what this relationship is with the body. So I will go quickly over some of the ideas that we talked about. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but I did see somebody asking, is there access to part one? I believe part one is posted on Rick's website. I also have it posted on my YouTube page. I will go over the basic ideas that we talked about then, though, and then we'll have time for questions afterwards. So in looking at the sensitization process, we start on the left of the screen there with the nice calm blue nervous system. We add some internal factors and some external factors over time. It gets wound up. That sits there over time, changing what's happening in the body. And then usually there's a triggering event. And then we have overload and dysregulation. And all the symptoms that you know so well are listed there. I'm not going to go over them because they're very triggering to hear. What do we do about it is what we want to get to, right? That's why we're here today. So in order to reverse the changes as much as we can, it does take time. It's multifactorial because when you think about it, it's multifactorial and over time to get to this place. So it's the same thing back. So we start with things like calming the nervous system, meditation, mindfulness, hypnosis, visualization, engaging neuroplasticity, which we talked about last time, desensitizing traumas. We'll talk a little bit about that this time, but that's a whole topic in itself. Changing coping styles, using new strategies, engaging compassion, changing cognitive style. We'll talk a little bit about those things today. Dealing with losses. That's a big one. There's a whole emotional landscape that goes along with sensitization, and that needs to be addressed as well. Of course, reducing triggers, and all of this leads to improved general health, more movement, easier breathing, and of course, diet, exercise, and rest. So now, concepts that we covered quite quickly last time, some of the neuroplastic ideas are what's happening in the brain, how does the brain change to adapt to sensitization, the real estate idea of this. And this is a map of how the real estate works, and what you focus on really determines what real estate is grown or not grown. And another one, default neural network. I was saying what I find a lot in the clients that I work with is they've been struggling with chronic illness for so long, and all the work that goes along with it, tracking symptoms, going over their story again and again, going to appointments and organizing, and they get into this entrenched work mode in the brain. And the brain adapts to that and kind of forgets how to not work. So it's constantly looking for the work to do, and it creates a lot of stress, a lot of tension. So there's some ideas about how to move the brain back into something that is more relaxed, some daydreaming, some creativity, some play, and how to retrain the brain to just stay in that place. Another idea is this binocular exercise. This has to do with that mind map of real estate. Is focusing and enhancing the parts of the body that feel okay, maybe even normal, and minimizing, we switch those binoculars around, minimizing the parts of the body that are very, very problematic. And, you know, there's more detail with this, of course, so view the video from last time in those two places. Landmarking with vocabulary. Now we're going to touch on that today in other strategies. How you view, how you speak of your body sensations, how you approach them, the relationship you have with them really, really matters. So there's some ideas there. Guiding your brain to focus on what's normal, using words other than the P word, we say, to describe your sensations. and trying to view uncomfortable sensations as just information. I had a little bit more detail about that last time too. This one I use quite a bit, sensory overlay or sensory revision. That means calling up from memory what the body's experience was when it felt fine, when it felt good, when it was moving, when it was riding a bike or relaxing, and really sitting with that and saying, but how did my body feel? And it's like that landmarking idea of getting the brain to remember and to reconnect with what different sensations, good sensations, feel like, because you've been stuck in the bad sensations for so long. And this last one, I really wanted to touch on this one again because so many people tell me this really helps. This is called savoring. And it's, again, it's changing the amount of brain that's being used from focusing on illness to focusing on something else. We want to unatrophy. We want to grow the parts of the brain that are shrinking, perhaps because there's so much focus on symptoms and problems and the story that you have to tell again and again and explaining how you feel again and again. We want to just take a break and feel some pleasure for a change and start to grow the pleasure centers back because they're offline for a long time. We want to bring them back online. So that means anytime you come across anything pleasurable, it could be the smell of the first coffee in the morning. It could be a sunrise that you see. It could be a happy cat that's lying there purring. It could be the flowers that are blooming next door, anything. When you notice something that you go, oh, that's nice, stop, take a moment and really sit with that feeling of, oh, that is nice, though. That is. And really sit with it and allow that pleasure to steep in the brain, savor the pleasure, and it lights up different parts of the brain rather than those hardworking ones all the time. Okay, and now, so that was the first, in a nutshell, that was the first video. Lots more information, of course, in the first video. Now we're moving on to new strategies and new ideas that are going to piggyback on these. We're going to be looking at the mind-body relationship and how it becomes out of balance and then how to get it back into balance. We're going to talk about that phrase that I like to use, optimizing the internal environment by shifting what's happening cognitively, and that's neuroplasticity as well. We're going to talk about a strategy to regulate and calm the central nervous system. And we're going to just touch on neutralizing trauma, although, as I say, that is a whole other topic in itself, fascinating stuff. We're going to touch on it and the stuff that I find really works in my work with my clients. Okay. So, mind-body imbalance. What do you notice in this picture, right? This poor woman is trying to do something. She's trying to work out, but it's not quite happening. Usually, in the stories that I hear, and in my own experience of life as well, we start off in our lives feeling strong, feeling connected. Our body responds to what we want in a fairly normal way. And in fact, our expectations match the fact that our bodies will do whatever we kind of want it to do. When we're children, if we want to just run, we just run. If we're teenagers and we want to, go hiking or even stay out all night and go to school the next day, it can happen. Now, some people don't have the benefit of this. Some people, of course, have been struggling from childhood with body issues, with anxiety. For most people, there's still a naturalness to the body. I don't know if you can take a moment and remember a time when you were a kid and you were just outside playing. You were just running around. You're not even thinking about the body. It's so assumed that the body's going to respond that there's no thought for it. So we kind of grow into this assumption that the body's going to do what we want all the way through to our adult years. And at some point in all of the stories here, at some point, the body can't respond anymore. The messages become too hard to hear. Sorry, that should say here. But we still carry on. And this is something that is really, I hear it again and again and again. This, my body, yeah, I was sore, yeah, I was achy, but whatever. I just did it anyway. I just pushed through. So this is the point at which a split happens between the willful mind and the body. The who I am, which is up here in my head now, and what my body wants to do, which is down there. And I'm just going to not listen to my body. If it's got aches and pains, whatever. I'll just keep going. It'll be fine. I'll do what they want first. I'll get all my work done first. Then I'll relax. I'll do this, then I'll relax. So this split that happens at around this time. So this disconnect starts to remove the head from the body, so to speak. And it's common for this to happen at different times in our lives when we're working at work. Perhaps we're thinking a lot and we're not really aware of what's going on. So some of this is normal. But what we're talking about here is a kind of relocation of the self. And a lot of times, if I'm working with someone, I'll say, you know, it kind of sounds like you're living just in your head. And I'll sort of make a box with my hands around my head. You're kind of just in here. What does it feel like to be in your body? And a lot of folks say, I don't want to be there. It's not happy there. It's too much there. I'm just going to be in my head. So there's another sort of society reinforcing of this, and that is this no pain, no gain idea, which really drives me nuts to hear, because it's like, I'm sorry, pain means something. If you're having pain, maybe stop and listen for a moment, but a lot of folks think that this pushing through mentality is actually a good thing. It gets them where they want to go. And as I was looking for pictures to go along with this no pain, no gain idea, I was just so surprised that even Googling no pain, no gain, you get all of these tough pictures of these people that are sweaty and muscular, and they're like, oh, I just did a super good workout and I'm going to push through my pain. And doesn't that make me a stronger, better, braver person? And it's like, wow, no, it really doesn't. It hurts you. It's equivalent to ignoring an entire protest going on in your body, or, having a picnic in a tornado. La, 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 everything's fine. I don't have to worry about what's going on. I don't have to worry about all the noise that I'm listening to. I'm just going to ignore it until it's hard to ignore. So after living like this for a while, the mind and the body become entrenched in this split. And the brain adapts. So this is neuroplasticity. The brain says, okay, so we're just going to keep ignoring, but you're not hearing me. You're not hearing my call. So it increases the volume. It makes the call louder. And that's sensitization. So at this point, there's so much going on in the body that checking in and really listening can become overwhelming. And there's now an emotional reason to keep the split happening. This is a relationship. And just like with a person, if you split the relationship and you just ignore, the relationship kind of falls apart and becomes alienated, and there's resentment that grows up, and there's, all kinds of emotion that become dysfunctional about this relationship. So I would imagine that if we sit here just now and check in, how do you feel about your body? There's going to be a lot of emotion, a lot of different responses. What I tend to hear is, I'm frustrated, I'm resentful, I'm disappointed, I don't feel like myself, I don't know who I am anymore, I feel betrayed. Like there's a lot of emotion that goes along with this split and needing to ignore a whole part of your being. I'm getting lots of thumbs ups and hearts, so I'm just going to get rid of mine. So long-term effects now. Over time, the relationship, this split and these emotional barriers to really checking in and being whole develop into a dynamic. It becomes just the way it is. And it's like being next to, kind of stuck on a bench next to someone who is scared or complaining or negative or depressed all the time and really needing your attention. And you can't get a break because it's you. You can't take a break from this. You can, and so at this point, you know, people do need a break. And this is where people, like, I hear a lot of, I just watch a lot of TV. I just kind of zone out. I distract myself a lot. There's a lot of effort to have a relief and to have a break from all of this pressure and this split, but it never quite works because the more you ignore, the louder it all gets. And the new dynamic, this is an interesting thing here. The new dynamic, I have always found, tends to have similarities to pre-existing dynamics in a person's life. So for example, if a person was bullied a lot in school or, you know, in the family, lots of experiences of victimization, and then they go on with their lives, and then they start developing, you know, chronic conditions and symptoms and difficulties and discomfort. Over time, they will start to view their dynamic as victimizing, right? And, or if there's a lot of disappointment and betrayal in someone's life, a lot of grief and loss, over time, they might interpret this dynamic as being one that's disappointing, one that's all about loss. So whatever the lens is, just pay attention, right? Ask, maybe I would just encourage you to ask yourself, how do I personify this dynamic? And is there any relation to any other deeper thing? We'll kind of touch on that in the trauma a little bit later. I see lots of thumbs up and hearts, so people are saying, yeah, I get that. Okay, beginning to heal. This is kind of what we want. We want this alliance. We want this unity of self, wherever the self sits, and body, so that the self can be in the whole body, not just in the brain, not just in the parts of the body that feel good. The self can be in the whole body and feel okay being there, not feel overwhelmed, not feel, you know, completely oppressed by discomfort and symptoms. So we go back to the basics, just like a best friend. If you have a best friend and a rift happens, the best friend is disappointing you, the best friend isn't showing up for you, how do you handle that? How do you process that? And this is where some of these old dynamics come in. If you kind of sit and consider, how do I in general handle rifts in relationships? How do I handle conflict? How do I handle tough emotion in my close people? Perhaps ignoring, these are common ones, ignoring, like full on facing the issue. You have to talk to me, we need to deal with this, but maybe the body just doesn't know how. Helplessness, victimization. These patterns will help to figure out how to approach creating a unity again. And I say there at the bottom, forgiveness of perceived failures of the willful mind and of the body start the process going. Like my body sort of cut out on me right when I needed it in life, and I forgive it for doing that. That can sometimes be a hard place to get to, or an important place to get to. So we'll talk about how to get there. Okay. Seeing the body a little bit differently. We're talking about it here as a relationship, like another person, but it's not another person. It's not, it doesn't have a willful mind of its own so much. It has a biological imperative to function as optimally as it can at all times. All it wants is to keep you alive and functioning. And that's it. It's designed to live as long and healthily as possible, always. So even if parts of the body aren't working the way you want them to. Other parts of the body are. And even if those parts that aren't working well, so you've got gut pain, or you've got migraines, or you've got POTS or something, parts of the systems of the body just aren't functioning in an optimal way, but they're still functioning. That's the thing. The body can be under all this stress and be dysregulated, and it still keeps chugging along. It is designed to adapt to the environment, meaning it says, well, if I've had pain all this time, if I've had, sensitization, allodynia, all the stuff that goes along with it for long enough, I'm just going to adapt to that. That's my new normal. And that's why the body seems to be doing things that you don't want it to do. The question might be, but if it's supposed to be functioning optimally, why doesn't it fix itself? Because it's also adapting. And this is what has made human beings top of the food chain when it comes to survival, because we adapt quickly. So the adaptation is for your benefit, but it's also besides the point. It's just adapting because that's what the body is designed to do. It deals with the variation in the environment the best it can. And I've got a little ice cream example here. If you imagine that you say, I'm going to eat nothing but ice cream for lunch. That's all I'm going to have. Because you know what? Screw it. I want ice cream. Body has no say in this. The mind says, I want ice cream. And sometimes the body craves it, but that's adaptation. So you go ahead and you eat nothing but ice cream. What's the body going to do? It's going to go, okay, all right, here we go. I'm going to separate everything into fat, into sugar, into calcium. I'm going to absorb the calcium. I'm going to store the fat with the sugar. Okay, the sugar, I'm going to pump out a bunch of insulin to try to absorb it. I'm going to pump a bunch to your head. I'm going to take some of that fat and pump it to your head. I'm going to deal with the blood pressure change because of the osmosis with the sugar, and I'm going to make you thirsty. And it does all this stuff to deal with what the environment gives it, and it just keeps going. So viewing the body as this benevolent machine helps to kind of understand that it is doing its best for you all the time. It's not perfect, but it is doing its best. It's keeping you going. It's keeping you alive, given whatever the environment is that it's taken in from the environment. Sometimes it's trauma, sometimes it's toxic stuff, sometimes it's viruses. Whatever it is, the body keeps going the best that it can. And I've got at the bottom here, most systems are working well. And I do encourage people to take a moment and say, what is working well in my body right now? My skin, now, okay, maybe you have allodynia, maybe you have rashes, but by far, most of the skin on your body is working just fine. It's producing sweat, it's growing hairs, it's, immunologically keeping your body safe. You're seeing out of your eyes, you're hearing out of your ears, you're tasting, you're smelling. Sometimes it's not perfect. You're growing hair, your body is, or your heart is circulating, your lungs are breathing, your guts are digesting, perhaps not perfectly, but they still are keeping you alive. You're probably still fertile, so your body is still ready for reproduction. There's all kinds of systems and cascades of systems and chemicals that are working well and normal. So to start to heal this relationship, we start off by saying my body is actually my ally, and it's not doing anything against me. Now, to optimize this internal environment is to understand that your willful mind controls the tone of the internal environment to a very large degree. What you think matters. Now, this is pretty basic stuff, but I want to just really emphasize this. The calmer your internal environment, the less energy is wasted in your body, and that's important for most of us here. And the calmer your internal environment, the more adaptive and healing the environment can be that is circulating in the body. Now, I've got a scary movie example of how the willful mind really controls the physical environment. A lot of folks, I'm not one of them, I'll just say, a lot of folks love to watch scary, thrilling movies. They love to sit and get scared or go on roller coasters. You know, amusement parks are huge entertainment because people want to go and be thrilled. But what the scary movie idea is I want to be absorbed in someone else's story to the point where I am feeling their feelings. And when they are scared, I am scared. So you're just vicariously watching another story. But because of what you're thinking and what you're watching, your body is responding. It gets scared. The heart rate increases. You might jump and startle, especially Korean films. They're very scary. They do scary genre very well. So your body actually is there in the emotion, even though there's nothing scary happening to you. You can see the same for sad movies. Sometimes with folks who say, you know, I haven't cried in years and I really feel like I need to have a cry, but I can't access it. I'll say, here's a list of films that you can watch that are tear jerkers. People want their tears pulled out of them, so they watch the story of someone else to evoke sadness, and they change their body chemistry and they make themselves cry because it feels good. So we absolutely can control to a large degree what's going on in our internal environment. Those are just two examples of that. Now, I'm going to pause for questions because I like to sort of not let them pile up too high. So let me just see what I've got going on here. Is there a way to access? Yes, we see the answer. We can see the answer. Sound. Will I be doing it? Oh, this is about me. Will I be doing any patient group courses? I am going to be doing a course in September on the emotion of central sensitization. I'd like to do more. When I come up with ideas, I shoot them off and say, what do you think about this? And so, yes, more will be coming. Will this part also be shared publicly? Yes, this whole thing will be shared publicly. We'll come back and do the trauma piece. I think there actually are some trauma lectures on Rick's website, from what I recollect. I think it's been covered a fair degree, so you might want to just take a look. What can you adapt for neurodivergent people who have continuous trauma from just trying to live in the world? You know, I just said this to someone today, a very sensitive person. For sensitive people and neurodiverse people, for sure, the world is a difficult place. The issue is, what about that difficulty is traumatizing? That's the question to ask. Where is the trauma coming from? And that sort of requires a one-to-one. I can't talk about it sort of publicly because I need to get to know who you are, but that is a good question. I'll try to keep that in mind as I talk through the rest of the presentation, just like how would this fit the neurodivergent population? Do you work with clients privately, via telehealth? Yes, I am Stillwater. Yes, absolutely, I do. Okay, what about pushing through pain to do things that bring pleasure? Ooh, that's a good one. I have started trying to ignore it, to do things that will give me an experience other than staying home in pain. That's an interesting question. And I think the next slide, the next couple of slides are going to talk about how to respond to the body so that you can then let go and move on to the pleasurable thing. And I'll do one more question. Will the slideshow be available afterwards? I love all the content. Yes, I've been told that Bruno is going to send all of these slides to you guys individually, so you'll have them to keep. Love your graphics, thank you. I really like doing the graphics. This is a Copilot AI graphic generator. You'll see, interestingly, you'll see in some of the slides, there's some weirdness to it because it's an AI generator. I just go with it and go, whatever, that's fine. It's the best we can do. Okay, now we're going to get to how to respond, just like in this previous question. The cat or dog metaphor for emotional tone. I really like this one. Everyone can relate to this in some way. let's say that you have an animal, could be a cat, could be a dog, and they make a mistake. They do something that kind of hurts or aggravates. They break a flower pot, they chew up a lamp, whatever. How would you respond to your animal? Would you yell at them, as on the left, scold, shame, punish, bad dog, how stupid of you, why do you keep doing this to me? You're making my life so difficult. And how would the dog respond to that? Or would you move into despair and give up or disconnect and cry and say, this is never going to change and there's nothing I can do and this dog just keeps, and how would the dog respond to that? What would happen to the relationship? Now, with pain and alarm signals from the body, I tend to say the dog in particular is looking out a window and is barking at stuff outside saying, I don't know if this is okay. I don't know if this is safe. I'm protecting you. I'm protecting me. I don't know what to do here. Bark, 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 bark. Now it's up to you. You as the human have the willful mind. The dog is the body that is instinctive and intuitive and has an imperative to protect and do something. How would you respond to that dog? Would you yell at it? Would you scold it? Would you kick it out of the way? Hopefully not. In that case, the dog is escalated because it's kind of scared. Would it help to speak negatively to the dog? Would it help to shame the dog? Would it help to be frustrated with the dog? And what would happen to the relationship? Well, the dog would continue to be escalated. It might leave the window, but it would probably just go, I feel terrible. I don't know what to do. And it might then do something else, chew your shoe. It would sort of supplant those feelings and express them somewhere else. So the question at the bottom there, how do you speak to your body when it is making a mistake, when it is sensitizing, when it doesn't need to be, when it is giving you pain signals, when there's nothing acute there that is actually being injured? How do you speak to your body? And that's what sets the emotional tone. And the next slide here, what is the emotional tone we want to set? Now I ask people, what would you do with the dog if the dog is barking, 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 barking? And most people say, well, I calm the dog down. Well, how do you do that? Well, I sort of pull the dog over and say, shh, it's okay. And they do these automatic calming behaviors. They say, shh. They speak gently. They may pet the dog. And once the dog is calm enough, then they would distract the dog and say, let's go play. What's this? What's this toy over here? But they don't ever think about doing that themselves. So if I say to a person, so how do you soothe yourself? A lot of time I hear, I don't know. I guess I don't. So here's a really nice mnemonic, a little strategy that is easy to remember, the 4 S's. And the way to remember it is, how does a parent respond to an infant? Now, I like the example of the infant because an infant's central nervous system is unregulated. The parents must regulate the infant system. Now, what we're talking about with pain and sensitization is down regulation, but there's also up regulation. There's also, I'm feeling really sluggish and tired and blah. Come on, let's go. Let's get up. Let's go out. Let's go for a walk. Then that's what parents do to children if parents are adequate. But we're going to focus on down regulating. So the 4 S's are what a parent automatically does to calm their infant. Infant is crying. Parent listens, first of all. What kind of cry is that? What time of day is it? What cry am I expecting? So they're saying, what does this mean? Now, just like with the dog at the window, the dog is barking. You'd probably go up to the window and go, what are you barking at? So you would investigate first. Just like with an infant, you say, now, what's the matter? Infant can't tell you, dog can't tell you. So the first thing you do to calm them is well, the baby anyway, you pick the baby up and you hold the baby. So you put the baby on your shoulder or you put the baby in your arms and you hold it tight. Now this is called a swaddle. That's the first S of the 4 S's. We swaddle the baby. Now in nurseries, in the NICU, in the hospital, and in nurseries, you see babies all swaddled, lined up like burritos. And they're all quiet because they're swaddled. Now a swaddle is deep pressure on the body. Deep pressure has an automatic soothing quality for the nervous system. Neurodiverse people, everyone is different. Sometimes deep pressure doesn't work. Not every one of these is going to work for every person, but in general, these do work ubiquitously across the planet. But be mindful that it might not work for you individually. Sometimes if a person has allodynia, deep pressure is not going to work. But for most of us, deep pressure as an adult looks like a hug that's about 7 to 10 seconds long to really let the nervous system savor and calm. It looks like weighted blankets. It looks like sitting with someone in a couch and having that person kind of just lean on you and squish you. Being squished actually helps people. Having someone that you love and trust just lie on top of you and give you a squish. Rolling along a wall, if you've got a large enough wall. And some people even, I'm not going to recommend that one. One that I will recommend is putting a stretchy blanket around you and pulling it tight. Now you're all curious. Okay, the one I wasn't going to recommend is rolling up in a carpet. This used to be done for autistic kids in schools. And then it had a very unfortunate incident where one of the kids, its carpet was too tight and it was not a good ending. So don't do that one, particularly not if you're alone, but lots of other things to really get some deep, steady pressure on the body. So that's just swaddle. That's one. Now, the next thing the parent does, or holding the child, they sway back and forth, rocking back and forth. That's bilateral rhythmic stimulation. And that is the basis of EMDR. Heard of EMDR? Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. Eye movement, back and forth, back and forth. Now, we don't tend to do eye movement too much anymore. We do tapping, or toe tapping, hand tapping, or with electro tapping. But what it is it's back and forth. Now I'm snapping my fingers back and forth, left, right, left, right. That produces an automatic calming response in the body. As adults, how we get there is a hammock, a rocking chair, walking. Walking is beautiful. Our bodies are made to walk. It doesn't have to be a fast walk or a far walk. It's just enough to get the body moving in a rhythmic right, left, right, left. Even just a short walk down to the corner and back. Walking is beautiful. Running if you can. A lot of runners say they get to this high, they get to this trance. It's hypnotic to be running because of that bilateral rhythmic stimulation. Okay, we've got swaddle, we've got sway. The next thing the parent does is they make a sound. Now it's shh, or it's just soft, reassuring speech. It's okay, baby. It's okay. Everything's okay. I'm here. Shh, it's all right. It's all right. They don't say, when is this ever going to end? When are you going to stop? Here we go again. Another day of all of this crying. They don't talk to themselves like that because that won't work. Even if you're rocking and holding, thumbs up to that, even if you're rocking and holding, if you speak abruptly, that's what an infant's nervous system will hear. It will just keep crying. So the emotional tone really, really matters. You talk nicely to the dog. You say, it's okay, buddy, come here, relax. It's okay, that's just a kid in their bike. That's all right. And you pet them until you feel that their nervous system is calming down. So what that means for you or for adults is a shift in that inner dialogue, a shift in whatever the responses are. If they're negative, shift them to neutral, or positive. So swaddle, sway, sound, or shh. And the last one is suck. Now, if you put a bottle or a breast in an infant's mouth, it's going to focus, it's going to calm, and his whole body's going to say, here I am, I'm all right. Now, for adults, we can't do that, no thank you. But what we can do is make our cup of tea that we love and sip on that. We can make a nice cool drink and sip through a straw. We can chew gum. We can pop a hard candy into our mouths if sugar's not an issue. We can eat sunflower seeds. We can do something that's going to engage the sucking and the chewing. Now, this is why people smoke and people eat to comfort themselves, because it actually is comforting to engage this part of our physical behavior. It does feel good. Swaddle, sway, sound, and suck. Now I've got this question here. How would it feel to put them all together? So just imagine that you're in a hammock, swaying. You've got maybe a comfortable weighted blanket on you. You're listening to some soft music. You've got a pleasant tone in your own mind toward yourself. You're sipping on your favorite drink through a straw. And you can imagine how that feels. That feeling is vacation mode, right? When a person is stressed out and they're going, oh man, I need a vacation. That's what they're thinking about. I need to lie on a beach and just sip on a Mai Tai and just like, because we all have this instinctive connection with those types of behaviors calming the nervous system. If you lie on a beach in a hammock, if you're listening to beautiful music, sipping a cold drink, you've got someone pleasant talking to you, your nervous system calms down. So 4 S's, very important. Now, cognitive shifting, that has to do with this, how you speak to yourself, the sound part of things. Being mindful of the emotional tone of the dialogue. I'm going to get people to just check in here for a second and ask, how do I speak to myself? Do I have a harsh voice? Am I critical? Am I judgmental? Am I frustrated? Am I impatient? Am I just downright mean? Or am I compassionate? Am I kind? Am I giving myself space to just be what I am in that moment? And another question to ask, would I speak the way I speak to myself to my friend's child, with my friend there? Would I speak to a dog that way? Probably not. And why not? And if you answer the question, why not, with, well, because that would be kind of harsh and mean and it wouldn't feel good, that's right. It doesn't feel good. And it sets off a cascade of response in the body that is negative and stressed. And what we want to do is optimize that internal environment, do away with as much stress as possible, which means controlling this internal environment, softening it as much as possible, making it, if not positive, you notice that I've got some steps here, moving from negative to neutral first, because negative to positive feels like too big of a leap. The brain just can't go there. It's like, well, that's just not believable. Negative to neutral. Now, what neutral sounds like is I'm learning how to deal with this stuff just like anyone else is. I'm responding to all this stuff in a normal way, considering what I've been through. My body responds in a natural way, just like anybody's would, except, not with neurodivergence and with sensitivity. Sensitive bodies respond bigger. So my body is responding in a normal way for a sensitive person. My body is responding in a normal way for a neurodivergent person. Normalize. Then once you're comfortable sitting in normal and neutral, then you can shift to positive. It's a lot easier. And I would ask you to also explore, how does your body feel using this different language and tone towards yourself? maybe just check it out. Be harsh. Be consciously, critical and impatient and see how that feels. And then be consciously kind and compassionate and see how that feels. Now we get to trauma. Someone was wanting to talk about trauma. Identifying trauma. Okay. Sometimes the body has a hard time calming. You can do all the breathing, you can do all the meditating, you can do all the rocking in the hammock, and there's something that just keeps staying up there. It can't calm. Now, usually that's because there's some kind of trauma there. The trauma triggers are active perpetually. They haven't been neutralized. So it's like having background noise all the time that you just can't get to that peaceful place because of this background noise. Now, trauma can be associated, of course, with past events, childhood, unfortunate events of life, accidents, illnesses, things like that, losses. But oftentimes the trauma itself comes from having this condition itself. Somebody mentioned that in the questions. Yes, trauma can be associated with all of the journey of having these illnesses, these symptoms happening in the body. A lot of folks I work with talk about medical trauma. What is it like going to doctors? Yes, I see some, yeah. What is it like going through the medical system when the medical system doesn't understand what you're going through? They don't have answers for you, and they don't like not having answers. So they say, well, go talk to a psychologist. Sometimes I even hear people say, the doctor has said this is in your head. And that can be traumatizing. I had one person, I'll just say this quickly. It's always the example that comes to my mind. She was going to an insurance adjuster. She was having an evaluation. And the person who was evaluating her for her insurance for LTD had a big stack of books on the desk purposefully, and he slowly pushed the books off the desk to land on the floor with a huge bang to see what she would do. And I'm like, what? Wow, that's awful. That is so awful. She said she just felt so betrayed that a medical professional who is there to, help her, that's the mandate, is actually making things worse. So yes, there can be a lot of trauma associated with having these conditions living in this world. I encourage you to find a registered professional who can use EMDR and clinical hypnosis to neutralize the traumas if you're finding that your nervous system is continually activated. I do EMDR and I do clinical hypnosis. I kind of do a hybrid. We'll talk about that in a sec. Because sometimes the process of doing EMDR can be triggering itself. And I think Rick has talked about how his trauma group, they don't do it in the normal way, right? They do it in a very tailored way because of the very active and triggerable nervous system of the patients. So I kind of do that too. I do EMDR with hypnosis combined to keep things very, very calm. But I do encourage that if you feel like you're stuck, that's oftentimes a trauma. So this is what I'm talking about the hypnosis. I use introspective scripts. That's what I call them. So it's like a combination of targeting what the trauma content is. So let me see if I can think of an example. Okay, so working with this person who has lots and lots of difficult and pervasive symptoms in her body, lots of pain, all kinds of stuff. And one of the sticking factors for her in her life is that she has a fear of driving from previous accidents. So she's got some trauma about previous accidents. So we want to neutralize the trauma so that she can feel confident to get out into the world and go to her appointments and start to feel more independent. But we can't do EMDR. So what I did is I got her into quite a relaxed state, and we start with the body and we do some body sensation, body relaxing, bringing her locus of energy from her mind, because people are stuck in the box up here, down into her body. And then I weave in to her safe image, which is she's sitting on the beach, she's looking at the ocean, the waves are coming in, and behind her is a car. But she's on the beach and everything's fine. And I start there, just really, really baby steps. And over time, we baby step her into getting into the car, just sitting in the car, you know, noticing about all the safety features of the car, feeling it in her body, starting the car, getting a sense of control over it, and et cetera, really baby stepping her while she is deeply calm, and eventually getting her into this image of driving. And she's been able to get into the car and drive around her neighborhood, right? She hasn't gone full freeway driving. We're not there yet, but she has been able to get into the car and go freeway driving. Sorry, neighborhood driving, because we're slowly just, you know, without classic EMDR, we're using some EMDR components and some hypnosis components to combine to make a script for herself, tailored. Now, I would encourage people to do this kind of thing. If sitting with the trauma and processing the trauma feels too much, then really baby step it while you're being beautifully calm. So now, in the next script, yes, the next slide says, I do have a whole lot of free interoceptive scripts on. I have a Spotify channel that's called Stillwater Counseling and Pain Management for Central Sensitization. Now, these are scripts that I have made in session with different people, and I have permission to post them because they don't identify or anything like that. So they're all unusual, they're all different, they have different topics. Some of them is pain, some of them is fatigue, some of them is more trauma. You know, just roam around in there, listen and see what you like, and maybe there's something that will fit what you need. Okay, putting it all together, because we're surprisingly just out of time, things go by fast. I'm just going to move that thing. Okay, putting it all together, rebalancing. That's the most important. Rebalancing the relationship with the body by viewing it as an adaptive machine that is working for you, not against you. It is your ally. Repairing the relationship by doing that emotional work, forgiving yourself and your mistakes, forgiving your body and your mistakes, viewing your body as though it is a dog that is just doing things instinctively and it needs guidance. Optimizing the internal environment by setting the emotional tone in the body, soothing, using the 4 S's, using that beautiful, gentle speech, being reassuring, being encouraging. Sometimes I say, you know, depending on your experience, if I say, imagine that, you know, your mother is like, no, mothers oftentimes don't work. If there was someone in your life, a favorite teacher, you know, a kind person, a neighbor who was always nice, a grandmother, something like that, maybe just imagine their voice. What would they say right now? And try to get the mind around how to have a different voice. Calm the central nervous system by changing the cognitive style from negative to neutral and neutral to positive. And then really investigating this deep shift of the foundation of activation in your body, if it's trauma, by using clinical hypnosis and EMDR. So that's, okay, I'm going to back up. I'm just going to leave it there, and I'm going to answer some questions now. Let's see, I think we got up to there. Love your graph. Okay, what if you're dealing with severe MECFS and are bedridden, yet trying to remain positive because that's all you have left? Your positive attitude, you believe your symptoms. Okay, yes, I'm going to give an example. Now, I had permission from this person today to talk about not her personally and identifying her, but just the experience that we had. She was bedridden, and this was about a month ago. She was bedridden, she was despairing, and she was suicidal. Well, she had suicidal thoughts. She wasn't acting on it, but she was really in that place of despair and saying, I can't live like this. Now, seeing her today, She's out for walking. She's feeling joy again. She's connecting with parts of herself that she hasn't connected with for a very long time. She's remembering her interests and her desires. She feels as though she's living her life again. She still has the symptoms, but she has more in her life that is bigger than the symptoms, and the symptoms are slowly abating. And what really worked for her was the interoceptive scripts, because all she could do was listen. She couldn't really do a lot of work like analyzing and making connections and all that kind of stuff. Really, she could just listen. So we would go through these scripts and I would just move her body into a very deeply relaxed place and then shift things very gently internally while she was just listening. So I think your positive attitude is very important. Your question here again is, will you get to the point of not being able to function physically and mentally before improving? For example, I often lose my vision, my voice, my ability to walk to the bathroom and when talking on the phone throughout the day. Okay. You can move forward and start to fade some of these symptoms. This is very distressing, I imagine. And I would not be surprised at all if there was a certain amount of despair that goes with this and even panic. But if you can connect with this interoceptive, calm space and find other emotion, find other places inside of you besides this, it's a start. And then you can slowly pace to get out of that. I have seen it happen, and I don't see why it wouldn't happen for you. So keep that hope alive. Okay, trauma, and we talked about trauma. Yes. When you say calm for control, you're referring to using the mind to reduce cortisol levels. Well, yes, the mind and the body calming and soothing automatically reduces cortisol levels. So it's all connected. The mind and body cannot really be separated. If the mind is thinking calming, relaxing thoughts, cortisol levels will come down. Okay, is it the chicken and the egg situation when it comes to being sensitive? I am sensitive, but I've gone through a lot of trauma and neglect. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it. It's a little bit of chicken and egg, but what I always say, and I do have on my YouTube channel, I have a talk, it's about 20 minutes, about sensitivity and the connection between sensitivity and central sensitization. Sensitive people are prone to having bigger responses in their bodies, bigger positive responses, but also bigger negative responses. So it's just responsiveness is really what sensitivity is. Now, the difficulty is that this is not a sensitive world we live in. And the folks who are less sensitive are the ones who often make the structures of the world. They go out there and say, well, here's the laws and here's the rules and this is what everybody has to live by. And the sensitive people are going, but that doesn't feel good and I don't like that, but nobody's listening to me. So it's being a sensitive person, but I always like to say the world needs sensitive people. Being sensitive is a beautiful and necessary thing, because sensitive people, I kind of view them as being the moral and ethical guide to the world. Insensitive people run roughshod and they say, well, I want it, so I'm going to get it. And sensitive people say, but no, but that's wrong. Sensitive people are the ones that need to be guiding the world and pulling back a little bit on the insensitives or the average sensitives. So oftentimes sensitivity, there's a lot of trauma. And in fact, traumatizability is a matrix, and sensitive people are more traumatizable. And so they need to have just more care about that. But it doesn't mean that you can't, neutralize the traumas. I am a sensitive person. I have had traumas in my life. I've done a lot of work and neutralized them. I don't feel traumatized. And I go out into the world and I do my thing. So it is possible to be a sensitive person and a strong, effective person at the same time. Okay, please do something on trauma. I will absolutely try to do that. Medications affect me so much. Yes, because you're a sensitive person. Are there supplemental or pharmaceutical options for people who manage their central nervous systems but are still extremely sensitive? Well, yes, there's always pharmaceutical answers. My experience, though, is that sensitive people feel all the side effects of the pharmaceuticals. So pharmaceuticals are useful as tools. And I do encourage people who are really struggling to function to speak to their providers about perhaps a medical intervention. But I tend to think that medical interventions don't necessarily have to be lifelong interventions. It's a tool to use until you have the energy and the ability to solve whatever the underlying problem is. If you're extremely sensitive, then I would say, let's maybe work on resourcing that sensitivity so that you are more resilient in life, right? There's something else there. Perhaps there's a door number 3 that can be used besides sitting in the pain of sensitivity or taking pharmaceuticals. Okay, can you please give the scientific explanation so I can explain to the HCPs why I have to start my day alone with a movement practice to regulate my nervous system? I know I need this. I have brain injury. I'm not sure what HCPs are. Haven't heard that one before, but I'm guessing what it is. Okay, so this is a tricky one to balance, and in fact, I want to do a talk about that too. There's so many things that are fascinating. Is how to balance wellness with illness. Now, if you're in the system of the medical or insurance system, they're really geared towards the pathology of what you're experiencing. So they're saying, what are your symptoms? How bad is it? What are you not able to do? And it's all sort of negatively couched. What you're trying to do, it sounds like, is take care of your health, move so that you have energy. But the risk is if you say to your providers, I have to move every day, they're going to say, well, then it sounds like you're feeling okay. If you're moving every day, doesn't that mean you're okay? And that's the difficulty, right? Is to re-educate them to say, well, it is the moving that keeps me okay. And if I don't move, then I'm in the toilet kind of thing. They don't quite get that, but it is happening. It is coming. People are starting to understand that focusing on wellness is more effective than focusing on illness. I would say refer them to a therapist. So I have lots of my clients say, can you write a letter for me to explain what's happening? And I'm happy to do that. I write a letter and say, this is what it looks like. This is what the symptoms are. This is what I've encouraged them to do. Movement every day, relaxation every day, pleasurable, enjoyment, all that kind of stuff, so that it's written from somebody else. Not you, because they're not going to believe you, but they're going to believe a third party. And keep moving. Okay, good question. So how important are other nervous systems in this equation? Can soothing yourself with sound override being around someone else who is high energy and ramped up? Ooh, that's a good question. This is about boundaries, emotional boundaries, and simply being an empathetic person and feeling the energy of other people. If another person that you're around is high energy and ramped up, you're going to feel that. And that can be difficult. But it's important to have a boundary there that says, I don't have to feel that. I can give myself permission to just not. And it takes practice to do that, because what I have found is that sensitive people are really used to and comfortable and even entrenched sometimes in feeling the feelings of other people and feeling the energies of other people. I think this is why a lot of very sensitive people spend a fair bit of time alone. Because it's like, as soon as somebody else walks into the room, we feel the other person. But you can take the edge off that and say, I don't have to feel this person's energy. This is just them. They do them and I do me. And practicing getting stronger and stronger with that boundary. Soothing yourself with sound, yes, as long as it's a certain kind of sound. Sorry, there's a siren that's going to go by there. Not that sound. That is not the sound. The sound needs to be one that your nervous system responds to calmly. So it could be music, but it might have to be a certain kind of music. It could be ocean sounds, it could be nature sounds, it could be waterfall, you know, whatever makes your body go, ah, and just let go. That is a good thing. So you'd have to experiment with that. Okay. Another one. What is the difference between a bad experience and trauma? Okay. Though I kind of call this capital T trauma and small t trauma. We use the word trauma very loosely in society. I've been traumatized, and that was really traumatizing, and that was really triggering. Capital T trauma is like PTSD. Small t trauma is, it was a bad experience and it stuck with me for a while and I felt really yucky, but I got over it. Capital T trauma, you don't tend to get over unless there is some kind of conscious intervention. Post-traumatic stress disorder, the post part matters. Post means the trauma happened at least 6 months prior and you're still feeling all the feelings. Then it's labeled as a capital T trauma, and the feelings have to fall into certain categories. Small t is, it happened a few months ago, but I feel like I'm kind of over it and it's out of my system. That's not post-traumatic stress capital T trauma. That's a bad experience, but it worked itself out. And the reason why they have that post part is because oftentimes bad experiences work themselves out and a person moves on and they're not traumatized. But we can feel the distress and the gong resonation of a bad experience and feel like it's a trauma when actually it's not a clinical trauma until 6 months later. Hopefully that answers your question. Interesting question. Okay. My counselor said EMDR would be too much for those of us with CSS. What do you think? I think EMDR in its I want to say natural state, in its originally intended form, tends to be negatively focused. And it can leave a person feeling more activated at the end of a session. So what I do is I really work with the person to determine what is their nervous system capable of enduring. And if they want to do it, people go, no, I want to do this. I really want to do this. So I go, okay, let's create the safe image first, because always the safe, calm image has to be a part of the EMDR protocol. We create the safe, calm image first. We do a little bit of processing of the negative stuff, but we leave a chunk of time at the end to go back into safe and calm, to make sure that a person is not escalated or elevated before they leave the session. So yes, EMDR in the standard protocol might be too much, but with proper thoughtfulness and mindfulness, it can be tweaked to be acceptable for sensitive people or sensitized people. I'm not sure if I answered what is EMDR. Eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. It is a very standard trauma treatment involving bilateral brain stimulation, cognitive shifting, desensitizing of the traumatic event content, and reprocessing. That's the cognitive shifting, reprocessing, so reframing it in a positive way. It really works. I've been doing it for 20 years. The only time I've seen it not work is when a person is too dissociated to be able to connect with the process. Otherwise, it works beautifully. Does EMDR hypnosis work with neurodivergent trauma? Yes. I have seen EMDR and hypnosis work. Now, I work with a fair number of people with ADHD, if that's the neurodivergence you're talking about. Sometimes we have to tweak it a little bit, but oftentimes with enough calming, a person with ADD or ADHD can stick with the process, and we just flow organically. Like EMDR and hypnosis are organic processes. There's a structure to it, but within the structure, the flow is really up to what's working for the person. The guide, so the therapist, is watching out for the milestones of what is traumatic content and logging it in our minds and saying, that seems like a big deal. I'm going to get to that in a moment, but we're just going to finish this. So it's an organic thing, and it absolutely does work with neurodivergent folks and neurodivergent folks with trauma. Have you ever worked with someone who has chronic nausea? Yes, chronic nausea from vestibular dysregulation and tinnitus. And it's difficult, but it is doable. It takes time, and that is a tough one. And if you have it, I am sorry to hear that. That is very tough. My only personal experience with that is a couple of times in my life. One was when I was expecting my son. I mind over mattered it a lot because I've got all of this sort of, it's like, walk the walk, don't just talk the talk. So I do try to walk the walk. And I do find that when I'm feeling nauseous myself, I can, with the use of visualization and really deep grounding, take the edge off the nausea and work the brain towards softening all of that nausea. Okay. So this is a lot about the EMDR. I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit and see if there's any other topics. What is my YouTube channel? It's Stillwater Counseling and Pain Management. It's the name of my practice. Can you touch on numbing out and how to deal with the numbness? Okay, that sounds like dissociation. Numbing out is a protective measure. Most of the time when I say someone is dissociating, we just kind of have to go with it, because what it means is there's something happening that is not safe. And the numbing out is a way of creating relief from being not safe. So I would ask you to maybe sit with, what is it that's making me so not safe right now? If it's symptoms or if it's despair from the whole picture, then it's working with someone to process some of that and find the hope. There is always hope. I've worked with many people now at this point who have found their lives again. It does take time. I can think of another person, young guy in his 20s, who was specifically moved to Vancouver from another part of the world for all the snowboarding. He was super active, and he developed, MECFS, and was flattened and was very despaired and numbed out a lot. And now he's back. He's snowboarding. He's got to be mindful, right? He's got to pace himself, but he hasn't had a crash in a very long time because he's mindful and he paces. He feels the positive trajectory happening. He's getting out there and he's living his life. He's hanging with his friends. It is absolutely possible. Sit with the numbing out and say, what am I needing right now? And develop a dialogue with it, okay? It's hard to be ill with energetic children around. Absolutely. That is a whole topic in itself. How to parent when you have these kinds of conditions. It is very challenging. And that's when I say it takes a village. You must rely on the people in your life for help, right? You've got to just call on them. Don't be an island that feels like you have to do it all yourself. Allow yourself to be helped. And your children, a lot of times parents worry about, what message am I giving my children? I am disconnected. I am lying around all the time. I am not engaged. The message the children get needs to be something like, this is how we deal with hardship in life. this is what my mom went through, and this is how she stayed connected with me. This is what my mom went through, and she was able to lie on the floor while I played on the floor and talk about my play, right? Sometimes that's all it is. You just do your best, and you give positive messages to your children, and you be honest with them, and then they learn honesty, they learn authenticity, they learn that you're doing your best, and it's all good, right? Don't worry too much about the effect on children. Children, I have yet to meet anyone who has left their childhood completely unscathed. There are some kinds of unmet needs going on in any childhood, no matter how good the parents are. Parents are humans, they're not superhumans. So a child leaves their childhood with psychological grist for the mill. If they have a hardship, they're going to use that hardship to define the rest of their lives. For all you know, your children are going to grow up to be researchers, to say, I'm going to spend my life researching what chronic illness is, and they're going to do a huge benefit to the world. You don't know what their story is going to be, so don't despair for them. Can I do EMDR if I have not had any counseling before? Yes, you can. Your therapist will be skilled enough to help you navigate that. Does EMDR work for people with, I'm not sure what this is. Is it aphasia that you mean? Aphasia is an inability to speak. I would think so. It just means that you need to come up with a system with your therapist that you can communicate with. Maybe you're writing things down. Maybe you're using sort of signaling. Absolutely. EMDR works if you have a creative and competent therapist. How do you feel about deep brain reorienting for HSPs and sensitization? Well, if that's like the interoceptive deep stuff, absolutely. I think the deeper you can go, the better. Because what we're talking about is autonomic functioning and learning how to retrain the nervous system. So deep brain reorienting, I'm not too sure what that is, but if it's deep neuroplastic retraining, that kind of thing, absolutely. Can I do your session of EMDR online? Yes, if you go to my website, stillwatercounseling.com, it's all in there. Absolutely. Why do not all traumatized people develop central system sensitization? Excellent question. Because every person's nervous system behaves differently. Most of the time in the stories of people with sensitization, there is a whole historical background that leads up to the tipping point of dysregulation. It's not just traumatized people. It's not just trauma. It's also escalated nervous systems because of sensitivity, because of exposure to conflict, perhaps, childhood stuff going on. It's exposure to illness. It's chronic stress in the workplace. It's, dysfunctional relationships. It's all kinds of stuff that feeds the allostatic load, which is the stress load on the nervous system. So trauma is only one component, but it's a multifactorial picture that leads to sensitization. Okay. Is it better in person? If you're saying, is EMDR better in person? It depends. Actually, since COVID, I was doing all in person before COVID, everything changed. Now I do about 95% remote, and only a couple of people come in person because most of the people I work with have physical issues. So why not stay home, right? It's easier. And the EMDR works beautifully. So the in-person stuff, only if your body wants to have that extra bit of information that it gets sitting in the room with another person. If the body doesn't need that, or maybe that's even too much, then it's not necessary. Okay, I'm going to skip down just a little bit. Okay. Okay, good question. Why predominantly female patients? It's true. I do try to throw some male pictures in there, but I kind of lean towards female because probably about 90% of my clients are female. Now, men do have these issues. Absolutely, they do. They just don't seem to have the numbers that the women do. So I do skew a little bit. I try to have maybe 90% of the images are female, but I do have a shout out to the men out there. Oh, thank you. EMDR, not aphasia. Aphantasia. There we go. Okay. The inability to visualize anything in your mind's eye. Okay, thank you for that clarification. So I did have somebody I worked with who couldn't visualize. And so visualizing is only one modality. What we do with EMDR is we say you can hear messages in your mind, you can feel sensations in your body, or you can maybe see pictures. You can visualize. So I tend to just go with whatever is the person's modality. So this person that I work with who doesn't visualize, we just go with her body sensations. And actually, starting with the body sensations, she has begun to visualize now. And we also accessed visualizing through her memory. She can remember actual memories that she's experienced. She can picture it. So we start there, and then she's able to change the picture a little bit. But she was really stuck and blank for a long time when it came to just visualizing stuff. So there's always ways around. Remember, the brain is plastic. There's always ways to grow and change and connect. If it's not one way, it's going to be another way. Okay. Have you had a lot of recovery or remission stories where people get their life back? Yes. Now, just to be fair, it's never 100% of the life. And I don't say that to be depressing or discouraging. I say that to be like just acknowledging how the body works. If I break my leg, and if it's a severe break, it might not actually be quite the same again. I might get aches and pains when it gets cold. I might have a little bit more weakness in that leg. So the body does its best to recover, absolutely. But it might just say, you know what, I took a hit and I'm going to recover 80%. And that's great. What I often tell people is the lessons that you're learning now about how to connect with your body in a long-term way is going to pave a path for you that's going to keep you healthy longer than if you didn't do this work now, right? So it's going to keep you connected and balanced. It's going to keep you communicating and whole, and you're going to be able to deal with the hardships of life a lot more, with a lot more stability and fluidity than if you didn't do this work. So although the body might only repair itself 80% or so, the 80% is going to be damn good. Okay, that's kind of how to look at it. Hearing aids. Now, I don't really know much about hearing aids, so I can't really speak to that. That would be more of a medical question. Let me see. That might be, okay, so no support, Dr. Arsenault. Okay, bedridden, giving you hope. Such undiagnosed autistic people. Okay, what's your thoughts on sensitive people are just undiagnosed autistic people? No, I think there's a pretty clear difference between autism spectrum disorder and sensitivity. Autism spectrum disorder is a communication disorder. That's how it's understood to be. Now, there are sensitivities that go along oftentimes with autism, so I can understand the crossover of that. Sensitive people tend to be sensitive in physicality and in emotionality. Autistic people tend to have some gaps in their ability to communicate their internal experience and to connect with other people's internal experiences. And that's one of the hallmarks of autism. So although there's a little bit of overlap, they're not quite the same thing. Oh, okay. Last question. Can you talk about the difference between sensitivity versus CPTSD? CPTSD stands for, excuse me, chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, and that means post-traumatic stress disorder that happens during childhood, and the child develops through the experience of PTSD. It's sort of chronic, complex. I've got chronic on the brain because of everything we're talking about. Complex PTSD, because it involves development of the personality and development of the brain in a context of PTSD. It's a little bit of a different animal than discrete one-off PTSD from a car accident or something like that. It takes longer, and there's much more brain connection with CPTSD. There's a whole web of connection, and it goes back a long ways. Now, sensitivity, nothing to do with that. Sensitive person can go through life being sensitive physically and emotionally without having any CPTSD. CPTSD can happen to sensitive people, in which case a sensitive person will probably resonate with it a little bit more deeply. But sensitive people aren't necessarily going to be traumatized, if that makes sense. And I think we have finished now. There was one question about me and my designation, and I'll get you to just drop me a line, and I'm happy to explain that to you, but I don't really want to spend time here talking about that. So I think we are finished. I don't know if Rick's there and wants to wrap up. I don't see any new questions. Thank you. You're very welcome. Have I worked with patients with CPT? Absolutely, all the time. Anytime someone comes in and says, I've had childhood trauma, that's CPTSD. We will share the podcast. I'm very happy to share my knowledge with you. Please check out the free stuff I've got on YouTube and on Spotify. Enjoy. Any other questions, just reach out. And I'm going to leave you, the last slide is how to reach out to me. I've got my website there, my email, that's my office phone number. I have an assistant. She's lovely. Her name is Shannon. She's happy to talk to you and get you set up. Okay.
Thank you so much for another great presentation.
Good.
Definitely have to have you back. Have a great week, everybody.
Great. Thank you. Goodbye.